All right. So we're going to talk a little bit more about credit this week. Like I say, credit it's nothing more than renting money. So sometimes it makes sense to rent things. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. If there's advantage to you to do it, then by all means do it. But other times, again, I hate to be one track here, but if it's credit card interest, that's not a good deal. Never going to be a good deal. So here we're talking about personal loans. So these could be for a number of things. Large purchase, financial institutions, so commercial banks, saving institutions, credit unions, finance companies, not a good option. Family and friends, but they always leave out, taking a loan against your own stuff in terms of um, taking loans against your 401k, your IRA. It's anyway. I've done it a million times, and I've still got loans out there, and I have no heartburn with it at all because the interest is very low. The procedures are minimal. I literally did it over the phone. Not that I'd be irresponsible, but let's say somebody was driving down the highway and did this, they could do it in like a matter of minutes. So anyway, and then the interest ends up back in your own pocket, your own account, since the interest is being paid to you. So there's not much in the way of downside. But anyway, I'll quit talking about that. Um, Next thing, peer-to-peer lending. Yeah, I mean, obviously I get it on the other side. I get a lot of mailings saying, "Hey," well, I get it from both sides. From the people saying, "Hey, do you need to borrow money?" Cabbage or some of these other, companies that are trying to loan money, and then you get it from people saying, "Hey, do you have extra?" Basically capital money to invest. We've got, clients who are looking for money and do you want to loan it to them? And it's an interesting thing. Lending Club, Prosper. These are kind of the names change quite quickly. Cabbage with a K, I think it is, seems to be the one that's always sending out the mailers. But what the way they do this is 1,000 to 35,000. So those are, I don't know if that fits in the category of micro loans, but definitely small loans. And you as the investor, if you decide you want to you know, be somebody to provide the capital because these companies are just kind of middlemen, right? They line up clients who need to borrow money and they line up, people who want to earn some interest on money and above, bank rates. And anyway, in order to make that happen, they come up with a product. And the way that they sell it to you as the investor is that, yeah, we all know that small businesses, their likelihood of success is quite small, or not quite small, but well, in the case of internet startups or not, high tech startups, it's like 90% fail. So I would say that's quite small. But anyway, they line up a bunch of companies, and when you loan them, say like $1,000 to invest or $10,000, whatever it is, they split that up and probably to 100 different loans. So you just have a small portion, minimal exposure, but you've got some diversification. But anyway, whether that concept ends up being viable and is here a couple years from now, we'll see. But it's one of the new ways because the secret that they don't really say here is that banks, if you really want to need to borrow money, they really don't want to loan it to you. Banks are super happy to loan people money who have tons of money and probably don't have necessity for a loan. But if think you're going to open up some small business, you're going to go to the bank and get a loan for it. Good luck, and by the way, don't get frustrated that, don't think that your business idea is a complete failure because the bank won't give you money because they're very stingy. They don't give money to many ongoing ventures. So venture capitalists and some of these other things that are, people, angel fund investors and third party people are, prevalent because a lot of the normal places where you think you'd go for a business loan are not there. Um, whether the loan is sensible. So just, yeah, remember you got to pay it back. And, a lot of problems, especially with consumer loans, is let's say you're looking at buying a brand new car and it's a payment that's going to be a stretch for you. Well, it's not a big deal when it's a brand new car, but if that loan is 6 years long, that new car is 6 years old at this point, has a lot of miles on it, probably, has some increasing repair bills. And if you're not, anyway, so the way to look at that is, does it make sense? Am I willing to shell out, say, $1,000 car payment for this 6 year old car at some point? Anyway, vehicles, sometimes you got to do what you got to do, but again, buy what you need, not what you want. So avoid a loan source if your income is questionable. You know, yeah, even if they will loan you a loan, do you really want to be job locked? Do you really want to, you know, take grief from somebody you really don't want to work for because you got a bunch of debt outstanding? You're giving up a bit of freedom. So anyway, uh, maybe you're working for a great place. Maybe you're not worried about that at all, but sometimes things change, and it is nice to have kind of, I wouldn't say, FU money, but at least your personal finances are squared away to the point where you can say, I don't need this. I'm gonna change things up. All right, personal loan process. So this is where some of these documents we talked about, a balance sheet, cash flow statement, and again, you may not see this as they may not want that document, but you start filling out these drop down menus and listing all your assets and listing your income. And yeah, the components of those items are going to be right there. And if you have these documents kind of in hand, it's just either cut and paste or reference to it. Loan contract, yep, amount of the loan and the interest rate. Loan repayment schedule. So amortization, it has to do with, a series of equal payments. So amortization, and the way you'll see, especially on long-term loans, and I guess there's a different system. Anyway, the French system is somehow different, but we're here in the States. When I was in Europe, it was a little different with the mortgages. But in the States, if it's a long-term loan, it is front-loaded with interest and very little principal, meaning you're paying the fees on the loan for the first few years and very little principal actually paying down that loan. And then towards the end of the loan, it's almost all principal and very little interest. Um, and it actually sort of works in our system because that interest, let's say your house payment is $1,500. Um, it's not going to change depending on the amount of interest and principal, whatever that ratio is. But if I'm having to pay it, I want the interest to be heavy, because the interest is tax deductible. Principal is not. So you'll see people saying, well, we're going to buy another home because we're losing basically our mortgage deduction because your loan is, say, at the 25, 26 year point and out of a 30-year loan, and now there's very little interest in that component. There's all sorts of mortgages, in terms of periods. I took out a 10-year one in Germany and it was perfect, but it resulted in a huge payment. Um, the by and large, the most popular loan in the United States now and probably forever is the 30-year fixed. 30-year meaning 30 years to pay it off. Fixed meaning the interest rate doesn't change. But that's not, you can get kind of whatever you want. And when I was in Spain, it was just absurd. They had 60-year mortgages. And so it's kind of a joke, say you're in your 40s or 50s and you're going in there taking a 60-year mortgage. I mean, who's fooling who? You're not going to be here 60 years from now. You're given a mortgage to your children. But the property values were rising so fast in comparison to income, it was the only way that these loans could be done is to, amortize them over a huge period. Um, with my 10-year mortgage, it was a lower interest rate because there's less risk to the lender because the market only has 10 years to change versus 30 years to change. And I just wanted to get the thing paid off, and I had renters in there who were paying the mortgage, and these people literally, I lived in it maybe a year, and I had renters paying the mortgage 10 years, and now it's kind of just a cash cow where it just rolls off. All the money is now all the rent is profit. So anyway, maturity, life, or duration of loan, longer, lower payments, but more interest is paid. Okay, so we've got a puppy. I'm trying to get this under control. All right, collateral. Collateral is what secures the loan. So I talked about this before. The reason why interest rates are cheap on homes and cars and other things is because if you don't pay, they can repossess it. They can take it back. They can foreclose on it. Unsecured loan, it's not backed by anything. You'll see these called signature loans, whatever. And the interest rate is going to be higher because it's not tied to anything. Nobody wants to come through and try and, sell your used stuff on Craigslist or whatever. What they do want to do is they want to be able to seize your vehicle or foreclose on your house. They can sell that easy. So, cosigning, one word, don't do it. Cosigning is not a good idea. What cosigning means is that somebody has tried to get a loan and their credit's not good enough or they don't have enough income, whatever. They can't get the loan. So they come to you and they want you to sign on the loan with them. That's just not a good idea. Okay. So what's going to happen in co-signing, and often will happen with co-signing, is because by definition, the co-signer needs somebody to help them out since their credit is weak. So if that person who initially got the loan fails to pay that loan, it's going to go into collection. What's going to happen then is it's going to get turned over to a bill collector. Now, the bill collector, just like everything else in the world, time is money. Are they going to go after the person who originated the loan? No, because that person, their credit history is weak. Their ability to pay off that loan is weak. So what they're going to do is they're going to find out who co-signed that loan, and they're going to go after you with a vengeance. And oh, by the way, it's already gone to collection. There's already fees being established. It's just a horrible situation that's gotten so much worse. So, it's likely to end the friendship because that's probably why you signed it for. You're better off, doing anything, loaning that person the money individually, doing something. Now, if it's your parent or something and they're trying to build your credit and you really can pay it off and you are going to pay it off, fair enough. But if you're doing it as a favor for somebody, it can go horribly wrong. So loan application, this is just a generic form, could have all kinds of things on it. APR, we talked about APR before, annual percentage rate, all sorts of, legal documents when you actually get to the point of signing the loan. But sometimes they don't actually clarify the situation. They make it a little worse. But anyway, if you're looking at a loan rate and somebody says this loan is at whatever percent and this other loan is at a different percent, make sure it says APR. So that way you're comparing, like terms. And there's nobody, looking at some sort of whatever teaser rate or simple interest or something else. It's if it says APR next to it, that means that you can, it's can be made valid comparisons. So here's some sample loans. Sometimes they have like origination kind of fees, other finance expenses, a number of years. anyway, and so you can see the numbers will change. Oh, the interest is quite high, 200 compared to the others, but there's zero startup type thing. So this becomes more relevant when you look at refinancing and things like that. Right now interest rates are starting to go up. But when they were low, and say you've got a loan at 3 or 4%, and loans were down 2.85. Well, if I've got a 3% loan, it makes sense to refinance down to 2.75 or whatever. No, not always, because sometimes there's these other charges that roll in there. So you have to have, um, somebody who you have been working with perhaps, or do a little bit of due diligence and look at the mortgage rate comparisons to make sense. You see when it makes sense to refinance, but refinance it's a great option. I mean, my payments went down considerably. I had some loans that were at 4%, and now they're down below 3%. So in terms of a monthly savings, 600-800 bucks on each one of those loans. So that's kind of nice. Um, so here's one year loan, 12%. That's pretty high. Anyway, monthly payment of 1,700, and this is what they're looking at for insurance and principal. Most loans we're talking are longer term. Car loans. How much should you spend on a car? So yeah, um, I mean, there is, yeah, the no debt solution, but a lot of times you need a car. I mean, without a car, you can't get to work. Without a car, life can't go on. So a lot of times you end up getting a loan for a car, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because, again, they're collateralized, and a lot of times the purchase price is subsidized somewhat by the loan price. You'll see, oh, zero interest loan. Well, guess what? Nobody's getting money for free. Nobody's renting money for free. So that incentive is probably reflected in a little bit higher purchase price. It's the same thing you see with a trade-in with a vehicle. Well, they'll say, "Oh, we'll come off the purchase price by $5,000," but then they give you, 5,000 less for your trade-in, or they give you a ton of money for your trade-in, but then they don't adjust the purchase price. So they're gonna, kind of get a feeling for what you're more sensitive to, that you think your old car is worth a bunch, and if you get that much, you think you're doing great. And anyway, it's they're more concerned with the net. In fact, even worse than that, they're more concerned with the payment. When you say, well, I want to spend this much on a car, and they want to talk monthly payments, and so they'll adjust the number of years you're going to be paying on that car based upon your payment. So anyway, they kind of play you for a sucker. So I'm not a big used or new car fan, obviously, as you probably have discerned. Um, Short-term loans, yep, not a bad way to do it. But again, if the interest rate is low, and it can be because they have incentives to sell vehicles, and they also have the ability of the sort of repo man culture out there where they can get their car back. The state laws will support them. They're not going to lose out on it like they might with a credit card. That does work. Selecting the car, yeah, personal preferences, price, condition, resale value. Resale value is pretty critical. Right now, it's a crazy world. Resale cars are going for a whole bunch of money, but repair expenses, financing rates, other things like that. But certain car brands, and I'm not here to badmouth some, but for example, though, Toyotas, things like that, and trucks especially, they're remarkable resale values. Some of the other brands that maybe don't have a good reputation or an established reputation or no longer made, yeah, those things, the resale, the parts, it can be a problem. So the value can go down quite a bit. Kelly Blue Book, these things are kind of a joke. I hate to say it, but you've got Edmunds, you got Kelly, you got these other things. And what these guys started out with was they were third party, kind of appraisal agencies, and they would set the value for the cars. Well, it didn't take long for the, you know, car dealer networks to kind of acquire these companies and get to the point where it you know they now control some of the prices that go in there. Sometimes they're based upon car sales, but that can be kind of funny. And in Alaska, unlike states where they pay sales tax, there's no need for people, when you go to the DMV to register the vehicle, you may put the purchase price on there or you may not. It's a non-disclosure state, so you don't have to. In other states where you're paying sales tax on it, you have to put the sales tax or you have to put the car value because they want to charge the sales tax. But then there's all this back and forth where there's, sometimes you don't put the actual number because you want to pay less tax and it all gets kind of messy. So in Alaska, it's a great thing to sometimes be selling things because people flat don't know what things are worth, and that can be good on the high side or the low side. But that's a lot of reason why there's so many used car kind of places because people will. It's very tough to determine the value, and Kelly and Edmunds and some of these other companies that maybe in the lower 48 have more value up here. Alaska's so isolated, it's a little bit more difficult to figure that out. Plus, there's not the volume. You don't have the CarMax. You don't have these big, huge used car type sales. So here she's looking at buying a car, expected resale. So that's good that she's looking at that. Looking at the repair and service expenses, the insurance can depend. If you're buying, I had a Dodge Viper for fair years. I probably had, I don't know, 6, 8 Corvettes. And those things, it's always going to be high insurance. But if you can just take liability only, which is kind of a gut check, because if you crash that car and it's your fault, you get nothing. But if you can do that, then the insurance can come down. But for the Viper, for example, it was a no-brainer. I literally could buy a new Viper every 3 years based upon if, or pay full insurance on it. So I went ahead and took the risk, which was, it was amazing. I got a free trip to the Ferrari factory in Italy over that because the dealer in Saarbrücken had never met anybody who owned a Viper and hadn't crashed it. So he took care of me. Anyway, negotiating the price. Negotiating by phone. Okay, again, we're going to be online for most of this stuff. Trade-in tactics. That's what I was telling you, where they jack up the used car or the trade-in value versus the purchase price. No haggle dealers. Who's winning out here? We don't haggle over the price. Well, it's not like you haggle the price higher, so I don't want to get in there and haggle with them, but I'm not thinking that they're doing me a favor by having a set price and they're not going to dicker from that. You do have to kind of go online, do the research, and if you're up for it, plenty of dealers in the lower 48 that specialize in selling vehicles to Alaskans if you're willing to do the Alcan or do the car shipping thing. And the car shipping thing, that's a thing in itself. I've shipped cars up here for $700, and then I've seen prices quoted for 4,000 or 5,000. So a lot of information. Financing decision. Again, letting them run your finances or your credit every stop because they're going to want to do that. They're going to want to impress upon you that, it's more serious and that, we're that close to sealing the deal. It will affect your credit score throughout the day. So longer financing periods, up to 7 years. So 7 years from now, that car may be worn out, but your payments are still exactly what they were. Anyway, car may be worthless. So here she is looking at different ways, and this is what they want to do. They'll say, well, no, don't worry about how much it costs. What do you need your monthly payment to be? It's, I don't like that approach, and I don't deal with those guys. Purchase versus lease. Leasing is just about always not a good idea. I mean, it's a way to get you into the thing. They'll say we can get you a Mercedes for a very low price or BMW, but when you look at the fact that it's mainly an extended rental. Um, if when you return it, it has to be in a certain condition, without excess miles, and the rest of that. And if you have a business where you can write off some of those items, it makes sense. But as an individual to do a lease, it typically doesn't work out very well for you. But some people absolutely hate selling used cars, and this avoids that. It avoids the trade-in as well, but it's still sort of a painful process. Um, all right, let's look at the next. Disadvantages: you build no equity. Yeah, you don't own it. Maintenance and damages: drive too many miles, and if you try to end the terms of the lease. Student loans. So, student loans are kind of an ugly thing. They keep talking about forgiving them. I would expect that to happen. It's some of the most adamant people against the student loan forgiveness program are people who actually have been out there suffering, paying their loans, and don't want people to get free money. So it's whatever. Education expenses have just gone through the roof, and it's been hidden to a bit by free loans, or not free, but easy loans to people. So um, obviously try to be careful on the amount of loans you take. It may drive you into working into a certain career field that offers some sort of deferment or forgiveness. You may end up out in the bush teaching school. You may end up in the military if that's still a viable option to get some out from under some of that loan. Interest may be tax deductible, depends on your income. And again, the loan forgiveness thing, if that's an option. But the best thing to do is, try to live within your means, because this will definitely come back to haunt you. Home equity loans, good news about this, they are tax deductible. So you can write that off on your taxes as long as it, is used for home expenses or whatever. You can do that. Say you wanted to use it to buy a boat. Well, you just have to displace some money that you were going to use on the home, and people do that quite a bit. So you have to have equity in the home, though. Equity means your home is, worth 400,000, and your loan, the outstanding amount that you own is like 350. That means that you have, that difference in equity, and they'll typically loan up to 80% of that. Impact, yep. Interest rate on a home equity loan, typically variable. Variable means that it can be indexed to something and then change. So it means if interest rates are going up like they are right now, your loan rate is going to go up. Therefore, your payment is going to go up as well. So, um, variable interest rates, that's why I said the 30-year fixed in terms of overall home mortgage is the most popular, because it takes that variability out of it. I've had quite a few variable loans, but and man, the interest rates were very inexpensive, but there was definitely a bit of risk involved. It was tied to normally some sort of financial index. All my stuff was in Europe, so it was the LIBOR, the London interbank exchange rate. And anyway, if that rate went up, my interest rate on that loan could go up by say 1% per year. And there's typically a cap to keep it from being unaffordable that quick, but it did go up. Payday loans, things have gone wrong here. You're at the payday loan, the title loan, those kind of people. They have certain mechanisms they use to get around the usury laws. The usury laws are preventing people from charging excess interest, and the way they structure them, means that those laws for their, it's basically a scam, they don't apply. And so they're able to, cost several 100% per year. The reason why, if you look on your credit card bills, they're normally, maybe out of North Dakota, maybe out of Delaware, because those states have very lax usury laws, and they allow those states to charge huge interest rates. States, interest rates that wouldn't be allowed in the state of Alaska, state of California, state of whatever. But some of those states, like North Dakota, for example, and Delaware, they want to cater to the credit card business, so they have very lax loans, and those people tend to locate their businesses and all those jobs associated with the credit card business there. So alternatives, payday loans, pretty much anything. I mean, these are, you're down in the loan shark range. So friends, families, credit cards. Credit cards are a horrible ways to borrow money, but compared to payday loans, yeah, they're not 100% per year. So try to avoid that. Chapter 10, purchasing and financing a home. So we'll talk more about this. We'll have a separate section at the end of the lecture, or the end of the towards the end of the course, about some of the mechanisms to do. But um, how much can you can you afford? What you typically want to do is, if you're in the market to buy a home, the first thing you do before you go looking at homes is to go out and get pre-approved, pre-qualified. All right. So purchasing and financing a home. Obviously one of the biggest decisions you'll make, but not that bad though in terms of, fear, because the homes are generally a great investment as opposed to, a big RV or a whatever, a big truck or whatever. These things appreciate, so that's a good thing. Um, and loans, that the process is pretty squared away, pretty straightforward. What you need to do if you're in the market for a home, first thing you need to do is go get pre-qualified. So typically, you'll meet with like a local lender, and so whether it be, I don't know, Home State or one of the other guys, and go in there and get pre-approved. So what you do is, they pull your credit and they do a bunch of other items, and then what you can afford. So the reason why you do this before you start looking at homes is because if you haven't done this, and you hope to use like a real estate agent, you can get a far better agent. I used to sell real estate just for a short time, but had too many other things going on. But the deal, even me as not a full time agent, if somebody wasn't pre qualified, I'm not going to waste their time and my time out looking at homes when they aren't even sure what they can afford. And the way real estate works is, in terms of salespeople, there's about 3 to 5% who sell about 90% of the homes, and the other people are just kind of in the business, but they, were doing other things, or just not super serious about it. So the real people who have exposure to all these homes and are doing all the volume, their time is pretty limited, and frankly, they're not going to waste their time with somebody who kind of shows a lack of seriousness by not being pre-qualified. So if you get pre-qualified, the credit check thing, you're going to pay for that. So it's going to be about $50, but that's going to come out of your, um, you know, cost when you go to buy the house. So it's $50 isn't that big a deal if you're in the market for buying a home. But anyway, all these things about, 28%, all these different numbers, all those numbers will kind of be sorted out when you go in there and get pre-qualified. And there's no way you can come up with numbers like this when the housing markets are so different. If you try to go to, let's say, the Bay Area down in California, and you think your home price should be, people don't make that much money. Nobody does. I mean, it's crazy. So what you should be paying, what you should be looking for, what you can afford, um, it's a lot of that's going to be geographically based as well. So um, this is what they're saying. Typically, fixed rate in 30 years. That's just sort of the standard. That's what most people get involved in. I've always, had people or, well, even my brother, he's like, I take 15-year mortgages. I could pay off my mortgage in 15 years if I wanted to, but number one, I'm not going to because, I'm renting the money for a cheap price and I can invest that extra money better. I can get more than the interest rate, 2.85 or 2.75%, so I'm not going to do it. But if you're somebody who wants to pay off the mortgage and be done with it in 15 years, I wouldn't necessarily say you need to get a 15-year mortgage. Maybe you need to get a 30-year mortgage and pay it off quicker, make extra payments each month towards the principal. And if, things don't work out and you get in a hard spot, well, then you go back to your default 30-year mortgage, which is going to be considerably less. And so you've got that flex. There's no problem with paying too much on your 30-year mortgage and paying that principal quicker, but there's a huge problem with having a 15-year mortgage and falling behind and not being able to keep up. So anyway, talk to your lender. Those guys do that stuff every day, and they can give you advice. But I've never seen the wisdom in now again, right off I told you I took a 10-year mortgage one time, but that's because the interest rate was considerably lower. It was a fixed rate mortgage, or actually that might have been a variable. I was younger and stupider then, but I got a great rate and I just couldn't turn it down, and I could afford it, and it was only over 10 years. And anyway, sometimes things work out. Affordable down payment. So yeah, a lot of times you need to show proof of where that money came from too. Depends on the loan. After 2007, 2008, it became maybe more difficult to get a loan. You had a bunch of loans back in the, pre 2007, 2008, where they had all these loans. They called them ninja loans: no income, no job, no assets. And people are getting loans, and they're getting loans for like 5 homes because it's real estate, and real estate can't go down. Yeah, real estate can go down sometimes. The other thing was too that the investors thought, oh, these are people's mortgages. There's absolutely no way they're not going to pay off the mortgages. So these debts are secured because these are their homes. Now there's folks out there with no job and 5 homes, and they're more than happy to have them all foreclosed upon and walk away. So anyway, what they did though, they got even more devious because they used whatever collateralized debt obligations, CDOs, and all. You'd have to watch a movie called The Big Short, which is actually fairly informative and it's fairly entertaining as well. But anyway, it's truthful in the fact that they got a bunch of really just garbage loans and put them in a pile together. They collateralized them and they consolidated all these loans together, and they expected these crummy loans to be somehow better when they were all put together in a pile. So it was just a big pile of garbage that was just a bigger pile of garbage. And anyway, everything 2007, 2008, everything just fell apart. So affordable monthly payments. Look at your cash flow statement compared to your rent. Yeah, allow for continued savings. There's a lot of people out there that are very cash poor. They're real estate rich. They've got a huge home, but they can't afford anything more. But maybe that's what they like. If you're gonna waste your money, there's far worse things to be cash strapped over than real estate. Um, and when I say real estate, that doesn't apply to mobile homes. I hate to say it, but manufactured housing doesn't appreciate like stick built or regular real estate does. Some of the newer homes that are, whatever, manufactured and then resemble a stick built, those also may, you know, will probably um, appreciate. But traditionally, mobile homes, especially in a mobile home park where you're renting the space, those are not investments that typically go up. So don't go for the maximum. Yeah, I've broken that rule. Uh, don't buy more than what you can afford. Home values don't. People would not have. They would say, "Oh, home values always go up," and no, that's not the case anymore. Current economics, who knows? But the real comparison is between rent and mortgage. And the fact that a mortgage, let's say you're renting a place for 1,500 and you're paying a mortgage for 1,500. Well, that's kind of a no-brainer. The 1,500 mortgage is going to be a better deal because the tax deductible nature of not only the not the income, but the mortgage interest and also the property tax. And I would say too the quality of life and the fact that you're building equity. So 30 years from now, if that $1,500 mortgage, if your payment is $1,500 per month, 30 years from now, the rent on that equivalent kind of place would probably be, I don't know, 4,500, but that mortgage payment is still going to be 1,500. So if you're planning on being in a place for a while, the mortgage is a better deal. But for most people, what you do is you get that sort of starter home, and you get a lower interest rate when it's owner occupied, like when you're the original buyer. If you go to buy rental property, the interest rate might be, say, something like 8%, whereas if it's owner occupied, might be 3 or 4. So when you buy this small home and now you're going to move into a larger home, they don't force you to refinance it just because you're going to make an income property. No, you go get a new loan for your new home and then you just keep making payments on that old starter home and now you've got tenants in it. And so, those tenants are paying that mortgage and you are still the loan is still at that lower rate. So that's how it works. So this all comes out of the pre-qualified cost of buying and renting. We talked a little about that. I mean, the other thing with buying a home, you're going to spend more money on garden hoses and, all the other little stuff that comes along with it. If you're going to be moving, if you don't anticipate being around and you aren't really looking for income property, then renting might be a no-brainer. A lot of times, though, why people rent is because they can't afford to buy. The laws, the financial structure is set to favor buying. Consider a condominium? Not for me. There are a couple reasons for that. Number one, I'm not a whatever, as you might have noticed. There might be a few dogs around. Anyway, they would be happy to condominium. But the other thing is that, especially in Alaska, this is kind of frustrating. I noticed this when I tried to sell a few condominiums, is that most of the condominium associations have a clause that says that there can only be so many rental units in that, you know, association. So let's say, they only want 30% rentals within an association and you want to sell your condo, but you can't find any buyers. Well, the fallback would be, okay, I'll just rent it until I can find a buyer. You may not have that option. You don't see that happening with homes. Now, when I say that, HOAs, homeowners associations, are out there and they're always looking at rules and they probably don't want a bunch of rentals in their community either. So you might sign yourself into some HOA that, may restrict your ability to rent that property. So be aware of that. Again, I'm not in an HOA. Relying on a real estate agent, technically up here, I think they're still called sales persons because of just some of the shady details that have happened and where they call themselves agents and legally weren't acting as in that capacity. But if you're buying a home, you're kind of foolish not to use a real estate agent because the commission is paid by the seller. So you don't have to buy a home through these people. Now, if they show you a home and you're obligated then, but if you find your home on your own, even though you have a real estate person you're working with, if it's not a home they showed you, you can still buy that. But anyway, if you buy something through an agent, it's not going to cost you any money. And the other problem is that the for sale by owner things, the standard scenario was you would go out to talk to somebody about listing their home, putting it up for sale, and they typically wanted way more than it was worth. And you'd say to these people, you'd say it's not going to sell for that. And so as the listing agent, you wouldn't even want to take that listing because it's just going to be a dog. You're not going to be able to sell it. Nobody's going to be interested at that price. And so the people, the sellers, typically get frustrated and say, well, screw you, I'm going to sell it on my own. And so they'll list it at this inflated price. So just because it's for sale by owner doesn't mean you're getting a great deal. I'm not shilling for real estate people. I have no zero desire to get back in that business, but sometimes those people can earn their worth. There's a lot of things in Alaska, especially after the earthquakes, and not all the agents are good. Believe me, there's only 5% of the agents would point all this stuff out, but that 5% can really save you in terms of going, well, yeah, you probably don't want that one because the schools are bad, or you probably don't want this one because this property is only going to get sun, certain months out of the year, or oh, they've got a bad reputation for this or that, or something that could affect, you know, your future sale. You always have to buy something like you're, trying to sell it, and you never want to buy anything too unique. Let's say you're somebody who's like absolutely doesn't ever want to have kids, hates kids. I don't care what the schools are like because I'm never going to have kids. Yeah, you care what the schools are like because you've got to sell it to somebody, and that somebody probably does care about the schools and the kids. So the property value is going to be affected by that. So anyway, online realtor services. This could happen maybe at some point in the future, but it's not there yet. Zillow and those things they're not mature enough yet. Maybe things will change, but there's a kind of a sad thing that real estate, you know, transactions typically are 6%. Now that can't be stated in writing or law or whatever. It's just an observed sort of rate, and then there's lower, you know. Some of the online people will charge less than that. So there's resistance. 6% is high, but it's sort of the industry standard. But to even say that is kind of sketchy ground. So when you start talking about the commission rates, they'll talk about 6%, but they don't want to go too far into details because they can get into legal issues. Some of these other folks will charge less, but may deliver less. And you may get in that situation I was talking about with the for sale by owner thing where the properties are not right. Or I've seen people, purchase homes and I've gone out there and it's like, wow, this thing is, the well's not right or whatever. It's like this passed an inspection and come to find out there wasn't a, you know, agent involved and there were some shortcuts taken and inspections weren't done. And it may not show up on that particular transaction, but when you go to sell that home, and the well and septic weren't done or whatever it is, not, maybe you're on city water, but maybe some sort of inspections weren't done. There's things called disclosures. And if you know of a defect and you don't disclose it, that is bad. And if you're a real estate salesperson in that business, you're not going to cover that up because if you go to court, you are going to lose badly. Now, a guy who's doing for sale by owner, kind of a one-off thing, they're not a real estate professional, they might not disclose everything. Criteria, price, location. Location is super important. Maintenance, it can be. I mean, certain roof systems, schools. You just have to look at this home as if you're trying to sell it. Um, taxes between the valley and the MOA municipality of Anchorage could be a great deal of difference, but it can be a great deal of driving as well. So, homeowners association, uh, they can be great if you're sometimes they'll keep your neighbor from painting their house purple or pink or something like that, but they can also be out there in your yard counting the number of trees you have to make sure that you comply, or whether your trailer's parked properly. Ugh. Resale, you are going to be paying the commission, and then personal preferences. Market analysis, what they do here is, yeah, they always want to do the square footage thing, which I think is kind of goofy. Um, I've got a home in Eagle River where they were talking about, the value of the home and just wanted to know how many square feet, and that's all the number they needed. It's like, well, how much land is it on, a quarter acre lot or a 3 acre or a 5 acre lot? They didn't even ask. And then, different homes, whatever. There's more to it than that. So, but that's what they want to go with. What they're typically going to come up with, though, if you get an appraiser or somebody like that, they're going to try and find comparable sales. So if it's a tract home and a big development, it's going to be pretty easy to figure out exactly what that home's worth or close to it, because there's a lot of good comparable sales. But if it's a sort of a one-off property, more interesting property, and at least depending on some people, it's going to be very hard to value because there's probably not a lot of comparable sales. So that can be difficult. But if you're just doing the square footage calculation, I think it's quick and simple, but I don't know that it's worth much. But that's how they price, homes and and subdivisions primarily. Economic impact. Yep. So what they're trying to say is that prices for homes, if you notice, past couple of years, home prices went way up. And part of that had to do with the lower interest rates. It brought a lot more people into the buying category. A lot of those people would be sort of not in, they'd be unable to buy because with interest rates being higher, their monthly payment would be too high where they'd be forced to stay as renters. When they can get into the market, then all of a sudden there's an impact. There's also sort of a weird thing going on too. There's some of the big um, investment companies, some of the BlackRock kind of people out there that are buying up entire subdivisions, sort of the great reset, you will own nothing, you will like it, where they want folks to basically become lifelong renters. And so they're buying up entire subdivisions to the max extent possible and making them completely rental areas. Well, in order to gain all those properties and get everybody to sell, they're offering inflated prices. So I don't know how long that's going to last, but that definitely had an impact in certain areas. Mortgage defaults, home prices. So they're talking about, remember I said 2007, 2008, lessons from the crisis. Really all they did was make the application process a little bit more diligent, but people have a very short memory. Within a few years, things will creep back to how they were. Business activities, zoning laws. So you may want zoning laws, you may not want zoning laws, depending on what you want to do with your property. The valuation system, you have to get involved in this. You have to use your own common sense. The appraisers, they know what your offer is, and they'll look for comps, but don't be shocked when your home appraises for right at what you offered. It always seems like a coincidence. It's not that much of a coincidence. Negotiating the price, depends on the market. I mean, people are offering way more than the appraised price in certain markets. Hopefully, that exaggeration is done, but there's no problem with putting in multiple offers. In fact, I don't know, I'd be kind of disappointed if I put in an offer and it's accepted on the first time. That means that they probably would have taken a little bit less. But anyway, some of these rules, I don't know, they've definitely changed, but there's some markets where if you didn't offer more than the asking price, it was just ridiculous that they would not have done it. Down payment, in most cases, VA type loans, they can also be down to zero. Um, Collateral, sometimes you have VA, FHA, different types of financing things. But this is where you'll be a little smarter on this when you go to get pre-qualified. PMI, private mortgage insurance, kind of painful. I've had to do it on one loan. I think actually on the first home we bought because we didn't have the necessary, the 20%. But the market was just exploding. This was in Las Vegas, and within a month, I just got the home reappraised, and the home appraised for more, which meant the amount I had outstanding on the loan versus the appraised value, the difference was enough to where I could cancel the PMI. Because once you get to the 20%, then you can cancel it. Closing costs, a lot of different fees in here. It's very helpful to have the real estate person kind of explain this out to you. But all sorts of, I mean, there's a list 4 times as long as this. But one of those items will be your, credit check and some of your other things. So your $50 you'll get credit for that if you actually end up going through the purchase. So fixed rates, it's kind of preferred at all times. It just locks you in. You can always refinance later if interest rates dropped. But if interest rates start to go up, you've got some protection. Amortization table. This is what I was talking about in terms of the amount of interest and principal you'll be paying throughout the course of the loan. So here they're showing, so 360, that's a 30-year loan, right? Yep. So payment stays the same, 30-year fixed mortgage. So it's going to stay exactly the same from, the first day to the 360th month. But the amount of principal paid on that loan, so that's actually the amount, this 120 is actually being applied against that 100,000, and this is the amount of interest. So the principal is 120, the interest is 417. Here at the end of the loan, the principal is 534 and the interest is only $3. So the tax deductible portion of this loan is $3 at the 30th year. The impact of the mortgage, that's not exactly rocket science. So anyway, the interest rate, this is where people can get, priced in or out of the market. There's a certain number of people who can no longer afford to buy homes based upon the prevailing rate. Here's another example of what we talked about before. So this is paid per year, so they paid $1,475 and a whole bunch of interest, about $5,000. Here they paid over $6,000 in principal, but only $170 in interest. Again. Yep. So you take out a 60-year loan, it's going to bring that rate or that monthly payment down. But the amount of interest you'll pay over the entire term of the loan is going to be quite high. Most websites, yep. Bankrate.com would work. There's a certain point in the process. This is when you actually have the home identified and you put in your offer, and now you want to lock a rate. And so you can, call up your lender, or they'll call you, and that's when the interest rate is set. It can only be locked for a certain length of time, and then you're back to whatever the market's offering. But this is funny. So this is, the out of the book, and their chart, interest rate, and they've got 4% as the bottom number. Just not more than a year ago, it was 2.75. So it was off the chart low rates. And so that's why a lot of people refinance to get those low rates locked in, and now they're set for the term of the loan, 30 years. Here's the 15 versus 30. But again, you can, offer on anytime you're making this payments, you can pay additional amount. ARM adjustable rate mortgages. So this is the type that I was telling you that was adjusted to an index. A little scary, especially in times like this where inflation is starting to zoom. So relatively low, and then it can vary as based upon market conditions. And there are caps typically, but they're usually just slowed down over time. But they can, say interest rates went up to 8%. They went to back during I guess that was Carter. I wasn't around, but anyway, the Carter years, they had double digit, and it just shut real estate down. So a lot of decisions to be made. If you own it, yeah, you've got to pay. Well, you put that down payment somewhere, closing costs, maintenance, taxes, insurance, but the tax advantages and the fact that it doesn't change. You're building equity and potentially, maybe a bit better quality of life. They have different mortgages. A lot of these have been phased out after the 2007, 2008, balloon payments where you have a small payment, interest only, and then all of a sudden it just explodes. But people weren't planning on keeping the property that long, and they could always sell it because property values are going up. And once all those assumptions went away, so did the attractiveness of some of these loans. So interest only, yep. Refinancing, you just have to make sure that the costs are low, that there's certain times when it makes sense to refinance. And generally, let's say 0.5% or something like that. If it's that much lower, then you may want to jump at it. Just depends on the fee schedule. And that's it.